Hello, NightHaunt. I am building the last two MyrMourn Banshees. From the Age of Sigmar NightHaunt set. And I remembered that there was Banshees in Warhammer Fantasy, and they're called Tomb Banshees, and I was thinking they were the same thing because the Vampire Count's army uses a lot of the figures, or you can certainly use a lot of the figures if you want to, from Age of Sigmar. But that's not the case. I just spent looking it up, and there's actually a model called the Tomb Banshee. That's for Warhammer Fantasy that's available, and it's different than these Banshees. They're not the ghostly, like floating off the ground type of models like the NightHaunt. They're models that have their feet on the ground. That's called a Banshee. There's only one model for the Tomb Banshee. So instead of having 4 in your army, it's probably assumed you'll have 1. Certainly, if you use these to proxy the Tomb Banshee, nobody would probably be mad at you. This army is legacy anyways, because the way that it's made for Old World is that Karstein, the guy who was the first vampire in the Warhammer multiverse, hadn't occurred yet in the Old World books yet. So that's why they don't have this as a regular army in there. They could certainly go back and modify that, as they often do, and with the popularity of it, certainly make it a regular army that could be in the tournaments, but so far they haven't. I had some trouble building the first couple of these models, so a suggestion, if you build these MyrMourn Banshees, a suggestion I would have for you is get the models assembled, and get the gaps out of the models with glue or with green stuff or however you do it before you plug them into the base. That has been where I went wrong with the first couple of them, and I might end up one of them disassembling it and fixing it. It doesn't say in the instructions to do that. It says to plug it in to the base and then put more pieces on it. This kind of shows one step. But there was definitely instructions where it showed for the first part of this sprue where you plug it in and then attach it to it. I wouldn't recommend that method. That was difficult and didn't work out very well. All right, so I'm going to build 3A there, so I need part 5. These are really nice models because they come with these very ornate bases, which are really nice. These are really nice models, and in Age of Sigmar, these are important to have in your army. They're pretty powerful to have in your NightHaunt army, and that's actually why I picked them up. I didn't pick them up for Warhammer Fantasy. I picked them up for my NightHaunt army. But apparently a lot of the stuff that people worry about, whether their armies are tournament legal or whatever, is kind of unimportant, because even in tournaments, a lot of times, they're more forgiving about that kind of thing than you would imagine. Okay, piece 5 is ready. Now we need piece 6, and it's skinny. Yeah, there's piece 6 right there. So again, I am going to clip off the parts that are very fragile. Look at how fragile his hand is. So I definitely want to clip that first while it's being supported by the other parts. So I definitely want to clip that first. And then anything else that looks kind of fragile, which it really doesn't, so it probably doesn't matter really after that, the order that I do it. But I kind of support it as I clip it, which is really good because I'm shaky today. And I count the number of times I clipped it, which is 4. So I make sure that I get everywhere where there's a place where it was attached to the screw. Notice how I'm supporting this really well, so when I scrape this, I don't damage her little arm. These are great models, but they're very fragile. Yeah, see, there's something sticking off of her thumb right there, so I'm going to make sure that that's supported really well before I try to clip that off. Yeah, that looks good. And it would certainly be better to leave a little piece of it on there than to break it, right? And I find that my thumb is very forgiving to my fingernail, so maybe I'll just take and scrape it very carefully with my fingernail, just to get anything else that's on her thumb. All right, how do these pieces go together? Okay, so I always hold it how it is there, and there's these little notches, and it's showing something happening. You can't see what it is on the back of 6 that's happening with those 2 notches, but obviously it's probably these 2 spots right here. Okay, so I'm going to be careful not to break her dagger, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue. That actually stays together really well. That's a good sign. Always good to test fit these pieces before you put them on there. Always a good idea to close your glue between steps so that you're not breathing that stuff, right? Okay, and then give it a chance to melt together. Okay, so instead of attaching this to the base and then putting 8 on it, I would probably actually be okay to do that. But I'm going to attach 8 first because as I try to get this onto the base, it'll probably separate the 2 pieces. So I'm going to do what I said and not attach it to the base until last. I might not even show that as part of this video. I might just let it completely set up before I attach it to the bases. Okay, so number 8 is 1, 2, and they're all kind of fragile, so I'm making sure that I'm supporting the model as I clip it. Ensure that I'm carefully supporting the model before I scrape this, doing it. There's a mold line on it too. So I'm holding it with my thumb and really supporting it so I'm not holding it by a fragile piece when I scrape this. I'm scraping along with the edge of the knife, and that creates some friction that could break the model if you're not supporting it correctly. Okay, then I'm trying to remember where the last, oh yeah, I can see it right there. Okay. So it looks like there's probably a peg up here. Yes, there is. And I haven't had a lot of trouble with pegs, so I'm gonna not test fit it because I don't want to possibly break it by taking it back apart. So I'm gonna try to do this in one shot. Normally I test fit things, but when things are this fragile, I'm sort of afraid to do that. Okay, just a little bit of glue. If you get too much glue on there, you can scrape it off with your knife. And that looks like it goes on without really any gaps too much. See, there's a little spider web that's sticking in. I'm making sure while that glue is still wet that I get rid of that. And I can see another little place where there's, I probably scraped it, but I probably just didn't get it off by blowing. So that's my complete model, and I'm gonna let her set up really well before I put her on the bases. And if it's trouble, I will use these really nice base, or what I'll do is I'll cut these little pegs off and then just glue it directly onto the base rather than trying to get the peg in, which takes a chance on breaking the fragile pieces. All right, so the base that goes with that is 7, so I'm gonna cut it now, and oh darn, it's attached in 3 places. And I always try to be on the same angle as the edge of the base when I clip it. It's real easy to make a little mark in these bases that are on the screws. One thing I don't like about them. And then also, instead of scraping like this, like I normally would, I'm gonna scrape with the edge of the thing and making sure that the knife is on the same angle as the side of the base. So after it's painted, you can't really see, and then I'm going over it with my fingernail just to make sure it's smooth. I would really like it so you can't see where it was attached to the sprue once it's painted. And certainly you can just put a little thicker layer of paint or primer on the sides of the base too, to kind of obscure that place where it was attached if you mess up. Okay, close up my glue like I forgot to do before. All right, then we're doing 3B. Okay, so we want piece oh, I see, okay. You have to go over here to the bubble and assemble this first before you go over. Okay, so you got to read from right to left. That's why I was confused. Okay, I need piece 1 and 2. So piece 1 is this cloak, right? And there's really nothing fragile on it, where it's attached anyways. It's very fragile along the edges, right? And that's got a peg on there, so I want to make sure that I leave the peg, assuming that I actually end up using the peg. A lot of times you can be much more gentle by just scraping the blade rather than actually cutting it like a knife, right? Okay, that's piece 1. Now we need piece 2. And that's easy to find because it's got a little gravestone on it. And there's a peg on there, so I want to make sure I don't cut it. And the most fragile part of it is this arm up here. So I want to very carefully, from the back angle it looks like, I want to very carefully, and I'm doing it with the flat part up against the arm completely, both of these sides, so that it has less to scrape, right? 1, 2, and then there'll be 3 on the final model, 3 things to remove sprue from. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the most fragile is going to be this arm, so I'm supporting this between my thumb and forefinger really well. And I'm careful with that blade. I don't put my other thumb on that blade and break it. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, I like these. These are easy to scrape when they're right along the cloak, which I wish they were always attached like this. But the computer probably tells them where to attach it to the sprue. And it's probably so it can ship and be less likely to break. I'm actually surprised a lot of these things don't break more in shipping, but it's probably because they know what they're doing. All right, we've seen this before, these 2 triangular prism nubs that these 2 holes, not that one, but these 2 holes go into. So I like to put the glue into the female part, the innie, if you will, rather than the outie, the male part. Sorry for doing this off camera, but it's just hard for me to see. Oh, yeah, there's still some glue here. So I'm pretty close to having this glue used up. And it certainly doesn't hurt if you let it sit. You don't have to feel like you have to stick it immediately. It actually sticks better if you let it sit a little bit. Because what it's doing is melting the plastic. It's gonna melt the plastic on both sides, right? Okay, and then I'll just lay it down. Very clean, I didn't get any glue on the model. I got a little bit on the model right here, but once that's dry, I can just scrape it with the very point of this X-Acto knife. All right, and then piece 4 is only attached in 2 places, and they're both pretty rigid, so I'm not gonna have to worry about breaking it. And I use, whenever it's on the top of the head like this, I use the knife, the blade part of it, rather than actually cutting it with the knife. And you can actually go over with your fingernail. Your fingernail is pretty good at removing excess plastic and getting it flat too. And if I do use the blade like I just did, I make sure I'm on the right angle, so I'm going along the length of it, if that makes any sense. All right. The female part is on the inside of the head. Sorry, I know you can't see what I'm doing. It's difficult because there's so little glue left in this container that I had to squeeze as hard as I could with both hands. And that's why I was shaking so much. I had to squeeze as hard as I could with both hands in order to get it to come out. But hopefully, I'm going over that with my fingernail a little bit, where it looks a little uneven. And then I just attach it up into the slot where it goes. So the spider web coming off of it. And there's a pretty big gap in there. So what I'm gonna do, and you probably won't be able to see me doing this, is I'm gonna lay some glue down along that gap. Just to fill that gap. And sometimes I'll find gaps later on, and probably, especially if I've already painted it, and that's what makes me notice the gap, like right here on this guy, I don't remember the name of him. I'm gonna have to definitely learn the names of my army before I start playing. And I'm really close to playing because I have the entire Soul Wars plus some additional models. I have the entire Soul Wars set built of NightHaunt and the entire Soul Wars set of Stormcast Eternals built. So I'm really close to being able to play and making some videos of my first games. So I'm going to have to definitely learn the names of these guys. It'll make it a lot easier as I start playing. And I'm kind of squeezing it together to get the glue to lay in where I don't want the gap to be. Whoops, see there, I separated the two. So I'm going to hold that together and then I'm going to hold this back together. And especially since I had some problems, excess glue on there. Be good to remove before it's hard. Oh, that's strange. Now, I thought that I built the model wrong, and I'll show it to you in a minute. But actually, there is a gap in here between her head and her chest. And it looks like that's actually the way it's supposed to be. So I don't think I did actually mess up that other model. So I'll show it to you and then tell me what you think. It looked like in the picture, like the mouth was right up to the chest. Now I can see that they wanted that to be open, like they're showing that there's nothing inside of this creature, you know. So I'll show you the other two that I built, and you can tell me in the comments what you think. So see, there's a space between the chest and the mouth right there. And now I know I got some excess glue on it that I need to scrape off. But that's pretty easy with the blade. I wanted to fill that gap, right? Now this gap is not quite lined up, so I'll probably end up using some green stuff. Sorry, I never finished my sentence with that one. If I find a gap in there, especially after I painted it, I can use green stuff. And I might even be tempted to do that on some of my old models, since the green stuff color is really close to the color of the emerald, whatever they're called, certain paint scheme for NightHaunt. And here's the one that I was really thinking there was a huge gap. Now maybe that is a bigger gap than they're supposed to be. But maybe it's built right. And you can see where the plastic was kind of weakened from me pushing it down in there into these things. So probably what I'm gonna do is I'm going to scrape all of these and make them slightly smaller, the circumference of them slightly smaller so they fit down into these bases better. without actually bending the model. 1, 2, and that's the base. Yeah, that actually, I'm actually kind of getting good at these now. It's really satisfying when you scrape away the parts of the sprue and you see it turn from that light gray color of the where the sprue was cut to the darker gray. And you can't really see where you cut it off from. That's a really good sign. So I'm getting a little bit better at this. So I'm thinking I'll probably leave her like this. It looks a little wonky, but I think actually her chest is supposed to be separated because it looks like on all of these it is. Yep, on that one it is too, right? And I know that these were assembled right. Yeah, there's always a space between there. Now, what I would have thought better if it were me modeling it, what I would have thought would look better is the mouth extending all the way down to the chest. So if it were me making the model, that's how I would have done it, just to make it look kind of less wonky. But that's all I have for you today. Appreciate the subs and the likes. Make sure you check your subscription status, because I've noticed a lot of the channels that I have subscribed to, I have to keep subscribing because somehow my subscription disappears for whatever reason. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the comments. Don't be afraid to tell me something I'm doing wrong, because we're kind of learning this together, right? I'm a beginner at Warhammer. I've been doing it for 4 years, but basically 4 years ago, I built some models and then I stopped and kind of did Magic the Gathering for a while and didn't really do much Warhammer. So I'm kind of getting back to it. Thank you, NightHaunt.